Okay, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar, which has been co-organised by the Belt and Road Initiative International Green Development Coalition and by Environmental Defence Fund. My name is Jill Duggan and I'm your moderator for the first part of this session. I'm the Executive Director of Environmental Defence Fund Europe. And of course, the title of this is Green Shipping, the Urgent Need to Move to Fight Climate Change. So a few housekeeping points here. Please mute yourself when you join in. Translation is provided, and click the interpretation to choose a language channel. Use the Q&A box to ask questions. And we'll select and have speakers answer them if we have time available for that. So it depends how we do on time. This is a really important time for this conversation. Earlier this week, we had the groundbreaking and game-changing news of China's objective to become net zero carbon by 2060. Last week, we had the European Union's proposal to, which is yet to be ratified, but it's been a strong recommendation to change their 2030 target to increase their emissions reductions from a target of minus 40% by 2030 to minus 55% by 2030. And as part of that, to include shipping in emissions trading to try and tackle some of these hard to abate sectors. At the moment, global shipping accounts for only about 3% of global emissions, but as we tackle the other sectors, that will grow to become a more and more important part, and it's not something that we can ignore. So we have this afternoon, if you're in London, morning if you're in the United States, and evening if you're in China, but we have a really strong array of speakers to inform you on this topic and to hopefully point the way for some suggestions. So we're going to start off with some opening remarks from, we have three speakers giving opening remarks. Eric Solheim, who's the convener of the advisory committee of the BRIGC and a senior advisor at World Resources Institute. Camille Bourgeon, who's a technical officer the Marine Environment Division of the International Maritime Organization, and Li Yonghong, Deputy Director General of the Foreign Environmental Cooperation Center at MEE in China. And so the first 25 minutes will be opening remarks from them, and then we'll have thematic speeches, which I'll introduce when we get to that section, but you can see we have speakers Aoife O'Leary, Tora Longwa, Yu Huan, Lu Zhuzhang, and I apologize if I mispronounced anybody's name, and then there will be a panel discussion. I must apologize, I will have to leave somewhere through the thematic speeches, so I'd like those presenting to realize that it's nothing personal, it's that I have another very, very pressing meeting that I need to go to. So my colleague Jan Yu will take over from me as moderating that session and moderating the panelists later on. So without further ado, I'd like to go to the first of our speakers for opening remarks, Eric Solheim. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much, Jill, and I'm so excited to speak with people working on maritime issues from different continents, China, Europe, the United States. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. And when we speak about the maritime part of Green Belt and Road, let's remind ourselves what a proud history we are taking part of. The Maritime Silk Road was one of the lifelines of contact throughout the centuries in the world. And probably the most exciting period was what in the Chinese history will be seen as the time of the Yongle Emperor, or in the European or American way of putting it, in the early 1400s. At that time, the Emperor Yongle sent huge expeditions to basically all parts of the world. They visited Singapore or Indonesia or Sri Lanka, Yemen, Tanzania. Of course, all these countries didn't exist at the time, but they visited those places. And These were expeditions led by the then brilliant Admiral Cheng He, who was a eunuch. He had been a Muslim from Yunnan province, and he has been conquered by the Ming armies and started serving the emperor in this absolutely brilliant way. And these were peaceful expeditions. They were not to get colonies like the Westerners started doing right after that. And the expeditions were of enormous scope. There were many more and much bigger ships than, say, Columbus used when he went to the Americas, or Magellan when he made the first round tour of the planet. So this is a fantastic, brilliant part of human history. True, Yongli's son, the next emperor, decided that China didn't need anything from abroad. The expeditions were too costly, and basically China was self-sufficient with everything and didn't need this. And that didn't serve China well. So I think this is also a very clear reminder that an open China in an open world where we all work together, strong China and a strong world, that's to the benefit of China, but for sure also to the benefit of the rest of humanity. So China was strong and the world was strong when China engaged. China was weak and the world was much weaker when China disengaged. So let's take that lesson from the Yongle Chonghe period of history. But moving to the present, there are now so many positive signs of the green shift in the world. Jill, you mentioned steps taken by the European Union, steps taken by China. Let me add the steps taken by the United States of America, because they may not be as visible, and they are not taken by the president, but by the private sector. Just recently, Exxon was kicked out of the Dow Jones Index in New York. They said, thank you, you have served us well for 85 years, but now we are not valuable enough to be on this stock exchange. And they brought in Salesforce, California-based green company, which is working on high-tech solutions. And overall, each of the 5 big high-tech companies are no more valuable. I mean, the Microsoft and Apple and Google, all those individually are more worth than the 76 extradition energy companies which are on the stock exchange in Americas combined. So 76 energy companies is like one Apple or one Google. So it's an amazing shift from the brown into the green economy. And remind yourself, all these 5 high-tech companies in the United States, as Chinese high-tech companies, have made amazing green promises. Microsoft has promised not just to be carbon neutral, but to compensate for all emissions in the history of the company. And Google have made similar promises. So we are at really the time of history where we are making this great global shift from the brown into the green, and we are doing it simultaneously in China, in Europe, in Americas, and by the way also in India. Green shipping is, in my view, a very important part of this, because I come from a nation which has been seafarers since the Vikings, and where shipping and everything related to oceans is a big, huge part of our economy. But I see enormous promises in green shipping, and let me make a few points. Number one, shipping is the most environment-friendly way of transport. So moving anything from ships into any other mode of transport is nearly always harmful to the environment. So we should make shipping green, and we should do as much of global transport by ships as überhaupt possible. Secondly, there are enormous promise in technological innovation. A Swedish company is now contemplating a huge automobile carrier which will cross the Atlantic, and it's run by sail. Not old-fashioned sails, but huge, new, modern sails. It will go a little bit slower than by petrol, but it will do the cross-Atlantic trips with a huge amount of cars with sails. And of course, any number of other technologies are now also available. In my nation, Norway, we have the highest number of electrical ferries anywhere in the world because of good government policies. And we can look into a future where electric ships are not just small ferries. I saw the first electrical ferries also starting in China at the Yangtze River. but we can move ferries into electric very fast, and in a little bit longer perspective, also the seagoing shipping fleet can move into electric. What we did in Norway there can maybe also be as an example to inspire others, because we made a NOx fund where all the shipping companies and the fishing fleet were paying into the fund, and all those who moved into electrical ferries and new technologies, they benefited. So it was this kind of double, you were taxed, you had to pay if you made emissions, and you benefited if you did stop the emissions and moved into the new technologies. So added to this, we need to look into the ports. Green shipping cannot thrive without ports, and we need to look into green ports. The 10 biggest ports in the world are all in East Asia. Only the 11th is Rotterdam in Europe, and 7 of the 10 biggest ports in the world are in China. So the prospect of moving the ports in the green direction is very, very important. And green ports and green shipping costs come together. Finally, I envision a future where we combine green shipping with offshore wind. We are very fast moving into making offshore wind an economic opportunity. If we can have fleeting windmills, solve many problems. They will not destroy birds, and they are not visible from land, so no one get any negatives from the windmills. And you can potentially think of windmills floating in the Pacific or the Indian Ocean, so that a ship moving from, say, Shanghai to West Beach, California, can anchor and charge from the windmills while going across the Pacific, with no need to go into a port, which will be more costly. So to sum up, the Maritime Silk Road is an amazing historical adventure. It has a huge potential for the future, and we can move into green shipping in a major way by new technologies, by good government regulations, by initiatives from the companies, and by this bringing together offshore wind and green shipping. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eric, for getting us off to such a good start, and noting as well that we're moving forward in terms of technology into sail ships and windmills, but exactly the sort of technology, you know, vive l'échange, and learning from the past and looking to the future. So thank you again. We now move on to our second speaker, Camille Boujon, who is the Technical Officer in the Marine Environment Division at the International Maritime Organization. Camille, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Jill. A good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants. I understand located in various parts of the world. And first, a very happy World Maritime Day to all of you, and a special thought to all seafarers and their families suffering from travel restrictions around the globe. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to briefly introduce IMO action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping. As you may know, the International Maritime Organization adopted in 2018, more than 2 years ago now, its initial strategy on reduction of GHG emissions from ships. It aims to phase out shipping's GHG emissions as soon as possible in this century, with different intermediate levels of ambition up to 2050 to reach this long-term vision. First level of ambition is to further increase the energy efficiency of new build ships by strengthening what we call the Energy Efficiency Design Index requirements, the EEDI. In this regard, IMO's Marine Environment Protection Committee recently approved more ambitious EEDI reduction factors for various ship types. And this means that ships built in the coming years will have to comply with stricter design efficiency levels. I can give a concrete example. According to these future IMO requirements, the biggest container ships built from mid-2022 will have to be 50% less carbon intensive than they were 10 years ago. Then the second level of ambition of the strategy is to reduce the carbon intensity as an average across international shipping by at least 40% by 2030 compared to 2008. I have to say that despite the difficult circumstances caused by COVID-19, many IMO member states and shipping industry associations have really demonstrated their commitment to work towards reaching an agreement on a set of binding amendments to the MARPOL Convention that would contribute to reach this target. And very recently, it's a matter of days now, a large group of co-sponsors have submitted a new consolidated set of amendments which combines both a technical approach and an operational approach composed of a carbon intensity rating system as inspired initially by China, based on carbon intensity indicators and an enhanced ship energy efficiency management plan. And the next meetings of the IMO GHG working group and also the MEPC will be held virtually from 19 to 23 October and also from 16 to 20 November for the MEPC. And they will be crucial in this regard. We hope that draft amendments will be approved by the committee. And finally, the third level of ambition of the strategy is to reduce the total annual GHG emissions of international shipping by at least 50% by 2050. And this is a challenging goal. It requires the massive uptake of technologies of low carbon and zero carbon fuels that are not always technically or commercially mature today. That said, we are encouraged to see that in the past 2 years, the vision and the ambition set out in the IMO greenhouse gas strategy have resulted in a multitude of industry and research initiatives. They're aimed at fostering efforts towards shipping's decarbonization. They're looking at wind assistance, it was mentioned earlier, ammonia, hydrogen, methanol, and many other technical solutions. IMO remains committed to further promote global regulatory environment. In this regard, I think it's worth mentioning that MEPC in November will consider a proposal by the main global shipping industry associations to establish a global GHG reduction R&D program to accelerate the introduction of low carbon and zero carbon technologies in fuels that are required to reach the 2050 ambition. And it's proposed that core funding would actually be provided via mandatory R&D contribution per ton of fuel purchased for consumption.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Kemi.
Conclude, I just hope that this event as well will contribute to raise the awareness and to mobilize all stakeholders, not only shipping, but also across the value chain to accelerate the energy transition of shipping that is needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kemi. And just a reminder to all of our speakers, we have quite a lot of speakers to get through today, so we really appreciate your efforts to keep your time. Our next speaker is Li Yongtong, who's Deputy Director General of the Foreign Environmental Cooperation Center, MEE, in China. Look forward to your remarks. Thank you.
谢谢主持人，谢谢就大根女士，尊敬的索尔海姆先生，凯姆利·波珍先生，各位同事，大家好！非常高兴参加今天的这个在线论坛，与大家共同探讨绿色航运如何为应对气候变化提供解决方案。首先，我代表生态环境部对外合作与交流中心以及“一带一路”绿色发展国际联盟，对本次论坛的举办表示祝贺。 对关心和支持中国生态环境保护合作以及绿色“一带一路”建设的各位朋友表示感谢。刚才大家也提到啊，2天前，中国国家主席习近平在联合国大会上表示，中国将提高国家自主贡献力度，采取更加有力的措施， 减排二氧化碳在2060年前实现碳中和。昨天23号，习近平主席会见联合国秘书长古特雷斯，习近平主席再次强调，中国既加强自身生态文明建设，也主动承担应对气候变化的国际责任，积极同各国一道打造绿色丝绸之路。古特雷斯也表示愿意支持中国推动绿色丝绸之路建设。今年以来，新冠肺炎疫情对全球治理进程产生了深远的影响，国际社会高度关注通过“一带一路”建设推动绿色复苏，也期待我们“一带一路”绿色发展国际联盟在这一过程中发挥更加积极的作用。大家知道，我们这联盟是去年4月份由生态环境部与中外合作伙伴共同发起成立的。1年多来，在大家的积极支持和参与下，联盟各项工作不断推进。截至目前，联盟已经有了来自40多个国家的150家合作伙伴，包括政府部门、国际组织、企业和研究机构。联盟在去年以来也举办了多场的主题编会活动，包括在联合国气候峰会期间、挪威的海洋大会期间，包括中国的大连的夏季达沃斯论坛期间，在中国深圳发起举办“一带一路”绿色发展创新大会。联盟还发布了“一带一路”绿色发展案例报告，并正在开展“一带一路”项目绿色发展指南和绿色发展报告等研究工作。联盟还设立了生物多样性、气候变化等10个联盟专题伙伴关系，其中海洋命运共同体和海洋环境治理专题伙伴关系，重点关注可持续海洋经济系统和绿色航运等议题，助力推动海洋可持续发展。刚才索尔海姆先生也向大家介绍了我们海上丝绸之路的历史。中国是港口和航运大国，统计数据显示，来自中国的海上进口占了全球海上贸易的1/4。经过多年的发展，中国绿色港口建设和船舶排放控制均取得了积极进展，为全球提供绿色航运发展有益借鉴。在后疫情时代，如何发展绿色航运，推动绿色“一带一路”建设，我有几点想法供大家参考。一是创新全球海洋治理的体制机制，加强国际合作，秉承海洋命运共同体的理念，以绿色“一带一路”建设为契机，充分利用绿色发展国际联盟等国际合作机制，开展绿色航运、绿色港口、海洋污染治理等领域的示范与合作，为全球可持续发展提供样板。二是注重航运业污染治理与减排，建立综合海洋管理模式，提高船舶清洁化水平，提升港口的绿色化水平，完善船舶温室气体减排机制，强化海洋空间规划和陆海统筹，注重海洋环境治理与应对气候变化、绿色金融等多学科的协同增效，建立综合海洋管理模式。三是加快技术研发，实现低碳能源转型，尽快确定长期减排路径。加快相关技术研发，例如提高能效和燃料替代，促进实现低碳能源转型，尽快确定行业长期减排路径，助力实现全球气候目标。各位同事，我非常期待通过这次会议，各方能够为航运可持续发展提供宝贵的建议，也希望我们联盟的海洋专题伙伴关系能够基于本次论坛的讨论，开展更加切实的合作，通过开展知识共享、能力建设以及项目示范等工作，推动全球绿色航运建设。预祝本次会议圆满成功，谢谢大家。
Thank you, and thank you very much as well, not only for your very interesting opening remarks, but for keeping very clearly to time. So just a reminder to the rest of our speakers today that there are many of you with many interesting things to say. We're now moving into the thematic speeches, and the first of these will be from one of my colleagues, Aoife O'Leary, who's the Director of International Climate at EDF in Europe. And Aoife, perhaps it's probably best for you to introduce your remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone. I'm Aoife, and I'm based in the same office as Jill in London, part of the Environmental Defence Fund. So if you want to go to my next slide, and this is, so what I'm going to talk about today is the opportunities and challenges, though I'm very much going to focus on the opportunities for reducing emissions from international shipping. You can go to my next slide. This is a quick collage of just some of the things that we've been working on in terms of reducing emissions in the Environmental Defence Fund. So you can see here some of the covers from our reports, a little extract from a podcast I was recently on, and also our Twitter feed. Our European Twitter account is where you should follow really to get all of our updates on shipping, and you can go to our shipping research page for all of those reports in detail. And I'm happy to discuss any of these because, as Jill said, we have not a lot of time today, so I'm going to give you a really quick whistle-stop tour of everything we're working on. So next slide, please. So this is the classic slide you see with all emission sectors, really. Unfortunately, you can see their shipping emissions going up and where we need to be down the bottom, with quite a gap in between. Now, as Camille said to us earlier, there was a historic agreement in 2018 in the International Maritime Organization to reduce emissions by at least 50% by 2050. And so that's the dotted green line you can see down the bottom. And I don't want to go into this too much, and DNBGL, who are speaking a little bit later, will go into a lot more technical detail. But I just wanted to make the point here really that in order to be in line with the Paris Agreement, actually emissions need to be reduced by at least 70% by 2050, and ideally by 100% by 2050. So next slide. Luckily though, it's not just me who talks about the opportunities. Lots of people talk about the opportunities, including the shipping industry. And we've heard some of that already in the opening speeches today. Now this beautiful collage of different logos is just some of the companies and institutions that are members of the Getting to Zero Coalition. And I really wanted to highlight the Getting to Zero Coalition because it was launched this time last year, New York Climate Week. And it is all of these different companies, countries, organizations coming together to say, our ambition is to get a zero emission ship on a deep sea route by 2030. And you'll see from the logos that it's not just shipping companies, it's also technology companies, it's energy companies, it's companies that ship a lot of goods around the world, organizations like the World Economic Forum. So it's really, really a great opportunity that loads of people, loads of companies want to get involved in. And next, you'll see also as well that there is a submission, which has already been mentioned, from the traditional shipping industry, the traditional trade bodies to the shipping industry, to the International Maritime Organization for a $2 levy on all shipping fuel. Now, this is hopefully going to be discussed in November this year. Next slide. So this is a really exciting proposal from the shipping industry, and the idea is that fuel levy will be collected and spent on research and development into zero emission fuels. However, it should be more ambitious, which I'm sure no one will be surprised at hearing from an environmental organization, but it should be in line with about $200 a ton of fuel, and I'll explain why. So first of all, in EDF, we are all about learning lessons from other sectors and how things have worked out before, all kinds of things like that. So for the shipping sector, where you have long-lived assets, ships last about 30 years, you need to have some way to make the first movers be able to move without risking all of that capital. So we looked around to other sectors to where there'd been a similar dynamic, and actually large-scale wind farms, large-scale solar farms were very much the same. The first large-scale wind farms were incredibly expensive, but the way that they really got going was through a little fee on everyone's electricity bill that was put into a fund and de-risked those early movers in the first wind farms. And then the cost of those wind farms came down much faster than anyone expected. So we are hoping to see the same in shipping. However, In order for that transition, we need to have a higher level than $2. We need about 200. And the other thing with that $200 is it helps to even out the future fuels. They will probably be hydrogen, ammonia. I think I saw somebody asking a question there about it, and I'm sure DNB again will go into more detail, but that should even out the difference between the current fuels and the future fuels. So next slide. So we already heard a little bit about the EU. And last week was very exciting for EU shipping nerds because we had, as Jill mentioned, the overall 55% reduction by 2030 announcement, but also in the European Parliament, we had a very, very strong report which said shipping should be placed in the emissions trading system. Now that's not legislation yet, and there's a few more stages to go through, but it's a really, really strong sign that Europe is ready to move forward. And Europe will move forward unless the IMO can also match that ambition and that speed, which is really what we're hoping for because shipping is a global industry. So I just want to leave my final thing is about learning lessons again. Our latest report have taken lessons from the aviation industry, which has for many years been looking at different types of fuels. And you can go to the next slide, actually, sorry, which we have looked at and said we can translate into the International Maritime Organization very quickly, which should save a lot of time. But what it means is the full life cycle of fuel will be regulated, because when we move to ammonia, hydrogen, etc., we need to make sure that they're actually fuels that are better from the environment than before. And then I've got one final slide. I think the slides have paused there, but there's one final slide with all of my contact details. And as I said, I'm happy to go into detail with anyone because I've only given a very brief overview. But thanks for your attention and time, and enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Eva, and well done for keeping exactly to time. So I'm very impressed. And yes, your contact details did fleetingly go up there, but I'm sure that they can be accessed from the website. So thank you again. Our next speaker, Tor Longva, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that okay. He's a principal consultant at DNV GL on the energy transition and the forecast to 2050. So looking forward to your remarks. Sorry.
Thank you, Jill. And as Eric said, your pronunciation of Scandinavian names is excellent. So good morning, evening, and afternoon and evening to all. I have to take the same approach as everybody. There is people from all over the globe attending this webinar. I'm very pleased to be here to present the maritime forecast to 2050 to you. So it's a study done by DNV. It was launched on this Tuesday, so you are one of the first to actually listen to a presentation about this. So previous speakers have put a lot of confidence in DNV to present all the technical details. We'll see if that's possible, but I'll try my best. So if you go to the next slide. So as you all have seen also from previous speakers, is that shipping needs to start on a decarbonization pathway. And this decade will be very important because this is the decade where you need a technical development, you need all the infrastructure, you need all the fuels to be available, so that in the next in the coming decades we can embark on this massive scale up that's needed, because it's not a small undertaking. We also see that regulation and incentives will impact probably already from 2023, as Camille presented to you. The combined proposal that's out there now will actually put requirements on ship very quickly. And we also see that, can you please go back to the last, thank you. So we also see that decarbonization will impact the costs, the asset values, or the earning capacity of ships. It's not only risk, there are opportunities out there as well, but for the ship owners, this is quite an undertaking. So going to the next slide. We have looked at different fuel types. We have looked at different engines, ship trades, and we have done quite a detailed study. I'm not able to provide all the details here, but the conclusion that we have come up with is that carbon neutral, and carbon neutral is important in this aspect, ammonia and methanol. That means that it needs to be produced in a carbon neutral way. Not only the emission on the ship side is important, but also on the production side. Those two fuels, ammonia and methanol, are the most promising fuels in 2050. What we see is that regardless of how quickly the decarbonization goes, we will see that fossil fuels by the mid-century will be in rapid decline and even phased out in many scenarios. They have to be replaced, and on new builds, we expect that electro-ammonia, blue ammonia, and biomethanols are the most promising fuels. So just to explain what we mean by electro and blue and bio. What we have done is look into the primary energy source of fuels. So you have basically three options. You have either renewable electricity that can produce hydrogen through electrolysis, and that hydrogen can be used to make ammonia together with nitrogen, methane, methanol together with captured carbon. That also has to be renewable. Blue ammonia or blue fuels are made from reformed methane, but you have to capture the carbon and store that. So you are then left with what we call a blue hydrogen that again can be used to produce, for example, ammonia. The third source is biomass. And I have to state very clearly that this needs to be a sustainable biomass. It needs to be not only the carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions from production, but also the other sustainability aspect has to be there. So ammonia and methanol, they both require new engine types. We expect that to be developed. The technical part is not the critical issue here, but rather the infrastructure and the distribution. That being said, if you only do this on new builds, and to some degree you can retrofit a ship, but the conventional diesel and also LNG engines will probably be in use for many years. So it's important to also have biodiesel, synthetic diesel, electric diesel, and also the same with methane available so that you can also convert existing ships. That's the only way to have this go fast enough. So if you go to the next slide, and this was very well exemplified by Aoife. It's all stakeholders need to work together to ensure that the ship owner, who is actually the decision maker in applying this on a ship, they need to have a business case, and that has to be driven on the technology side, on the infrastructure side, on the regulatory side, and everybody has to work together to ensure this. I put up some proposals for what this could entail. One thing is risk sharing mechanisms. The first mover, those that actually test out a new technology, they commit to using a specific fuel, they are taking a risk. It is costly, and that risk has to be shared. It was very interesting that the research board was actually brought up. That's actually one of the risk sharing mechanisms. Everybody pays into a fund, and then you can use that to distribute to research projects. Providing green finance is important. Of course, the regulations needs to be in place so that you have a level playing field. So the IMO's work is very important there. And we also see that green procurement is important in the early stage from the public side, exemplified by what's been happening in Norway and also other places around the world, where we see that electric ferries, for example, have been developing. That was the same we see happening with hydrogen now. So it's very important in an early stage. And later, we also, the private cargo owners charters also need to ensure that they buy green tonnage. So if you go to the next slide, that just brings me back to the highlights of this study. So as I said, it's very important that we use this decade to develop the next generation carbon neutral ships with all the technology that's needed there, and also the fuel infrastructure and the fuels themselves. We need a robust regulatory framework, not only to incentivize the uptake of new fuels, but also to ensure that they can be safely applied. And it also can be a private incentive schemes into this. Ammonia and methanol are the most promising fuels that we see, but we need also carbon neutral diesel and methane as transitional fuels so that we can apply them on existing ships. And the last one, of course, is very much directed at the ship owner to manage the decarbonization risks. It's very critical. It's both risks and opportunities, and there are a lot of choices that we have had to take today, and probably one of the most difficult one is that we do not have the technology and the fuel available today, but if you're building a ship, it will actually exist for at least 20 years into the future. So that's something for the ship owners to find out. That was the highlights of this study. So with that, I hand back over to Jill.
Thank you very much, Tore. And actually, I will have to, after I've introduced your next speaker, I will have to take my leave, but I think you have some extremely interesting themes coming up, not least from the next one from Liu Huan, who I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, looking at very, very topical emissions and health impacts from global shipping and embodied in trade. So I wish you a successful rest of the event today and look forward to seeing the readout afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
And your pronunciation is excellent. So I will switch to Chinese. 大家好，晚上好。现在我是在北京，很高兴有这个机会和大家分享这样一个话题。那我们刚才的几位演讲嘉宾其实都提到了，比如说我们可以从技术方面去实现到2050年50%的碳减排。那我们可能也有其他的一些需求，比如说前面提到了，我们其实不能光 rely on the technology， 不能光完全的依赖，更多的时候我们是需要设计一个整体的这样的机制，去激励我们的新技术的研发，去激励我们这个把国家的这个减排责任更多的给激发出来。所以呢，我今天的这个题目实际上是从排放和健康影响的这个角度去反过头去看，怎么样把这个排放和责任影响的这个责任划分下去。好的，下一页。这里是一些简单的这个背景。那么最重要的问题呢，就是我们首先这个数据是2012年，那么到现在我们更新到了2018年，大家已经可以看到是10.7亿吨，这个是最新的一个数据。那么这样一个碳的排放量，在全球大概是2.89左右的占比。可是呢，如果我们把这个船舶的排放和其他国家的排放放在一起来比的话，它大概是在第8、第9的这样一个位置。所以这也是一个非常重要的一个来源。那么右图又列举了一些在区域尺度和全球尺度上，除了碳排放以外，对污染物，也就是空气污染的这些组分，它的一个贡献，也都是占到了相当显著的比例。好的，下一页。但是很遗憾的是呢，在现在还没有一种国家分配机制能够把航运业的碳减排的责任给分配下去，所以我们看到的是以国际海事组织 IMO 来承诺的一个50%的这样一个目标。那么在这个倡议之下呢，我们就来探索，如果说我们想要把国家的这个动力发挥到最大，有没有可能是建立这样一种机制？好，下一页。那么这里呢，根据联合国的 UNFCCC 他们之前的一个研究提出来了，总共有8种 建议的选择方式，但是最后呢，经过这个评比，5种是认为是可行的这个方式。那么第一种就是说，全球的航运业的排放不做分配，就是 no allocation。那么第二种，3、4、5、6是另外4种建议的这个方式。那么包括根据这个燃油的销售量，或者是根据运营的公司的注册地，或者是根据它的出发和目的地，来进行一个划分，或者是根据出发和目的地的货物，就是货物的真正的来源，而不是这艘船它的这个航行的这个来源来做一个划分。那么前期有一些研究，我们看到其实目前能够做到定量的去划分的，也就只有针对第3种和第4种这个划分方式。而到了第5种和第6种，对于现在的研究来讲，就是难度过大，所以到现在还没有划分出来。下一页。那么实际上呢，在一个减排的责任的这样一个背景下，我们可以看到，就是过去的传统的思路是因为谁污染谁治理。那么这种情况是很适合是在生产者和消费者是在一起的。但是随着全球的这个生产流通的发展，生产者和消费者出现了一个分离，也就是说，这时候污染的发生地并不一定是真正的驱动力的来源，并不一定是这个消费的来源。因此呢，就出现了不同的这个观点，到底是由污染者来付费，还是由这个受益者来付费的这样一个观点。但是交通作为航运，作为连接这个producer 和这个生产者和这个消费者的这样一个环节，实际上交通在这个里面这个过程中，它的这个责任的认定就更困难了。因此，我们试图通过这样一个供应链，把所有的这些环节给连接起来，然后捋清楚它其中的这样一个驱动力，原始的驱动力。好的。在这个研究中呢，我们其实是要做2个创新。第一个新的事情是要找到它的这个驱动力，也就是把我们能够观察到的全球的海运的活动、航运的活动，给它反推到它到底是为什么会发生这样的活动。那么因此谁应该来承担责任？第二个就是我们要往后推，从排放，不光是碳的排放，还有污染物的排放，进一步的推进到它的环境效应。从效应出发来看责任的分配，和从排放出发的责任的分配是否有什么样的不同？好的，下一页。因此呢，这里就涉及到一个全球的一个物质流。从全球的物质流出发，这里给了一些例子。那么我们可以看到，实际上这个物质流很大的是依赖于海运来完成的。尽管从价值来看，大概只有70%的这个进出口的贸易是通过海运完成的，但是实际上，如果我们从重量来看，这个比例占到了90%。下一页。因此呢，我们根据全球的船舶的 AIS 数据，用我们清华自己开发的这个 SIM 的模型，进一步的把它发展到跟贸易关联的这个 Trade-sim 的这样一个模型，我们就可以识别出来每一次航行它的这个目的地、中途的停靠点和它最终的这个目的地、出发地到目的地这样一个识别。完成了这样一个识别之后呢，下一步，我们这里就用了一个中美之间的双边贸易的数据做了一个例子。我们非常幸运的是，在分析这个案例的过程中呢，实际上我们是可以看到每一条中美之间的商品，它在1年里的统计的进出口的信息的。因为有了这样非常详细的这个信息列表，所以我们可以既来统计它的这个金额，又可以统计到它的这个排放。那令人很惊讶的一个发现是，我们大家知道，就中国和美国之间是存在着这个贸易从价值上来说不是太平衡的这样一个关系。那么现在我们看到的，这以2016年的比例来讲，大概是2.6倍的这样一个关系。但是呢，在船舶的排放方面，这2个方向的物质流带来的船舶排放是相对比较平衡的，它的这个比例只是1.4倍。下一页。那么这个主要的原因呢，就是因为 我们这个图其实是比较复杂的，中间的这2个柱子就是我们常规的认识，也就是我们基于我们观测到的船舶和它的这个船型计算得到的一个排放。但是呢，如果我们把每一艘船它每一次的航行都追踪回它到底是为了运什么，那么就变成了左右两边的这个驱动力。所以我们可以看到，从中国到美国和从美国到中国的物质流是不一样的。那么从美国到中国的是最右边的这一列，实际上它有很多的第2类，也就是这个农作物和第10类。第10类里包括的很大一部分是一些垃圾或者是纸浆和包括再生纸的纸浆等等这些的产品。而这些产品它的价值比较低，但是它的重量比较重，这就造成了为什么我们直接从贸易的金额看到的这个比例和我们最终承担到的这个算到的海运的排放是不一样的这样一个原因。好的，下一页。那么进一步的呢，我们将这个作为供应链中的一个环节和这个生产端的排放进行了一个比较，所以我们可以看到，实际上海运作为供应链的一环，在跟生产端相比占到的比例大概是16%左右，所以还是一个非常显著的比例。但是这个比例如果是相对于对不同的国家来讲，它会有一个区别。所以进一步的，我们将这些排放到了下一页，就是追踪到了它排放能够带来的这样一个空气质量的影响。下一页，空气质量的一个影响，这是对颗粒物的影响和进一步对人群健康的影响。下一页，谢谢。那么很有意思的是，我们发现原来从生产端的这个排放，它影响的人群的健康数，大概是我们从海运这个端排放的10倍，也就是差一个数量级。但是生产端的排放主要影响的还是本国的人群，而海运的健康的影响，它的这个覆盖面则会更广。所以这里面又带来一个影响的跨境分配的一个问题。下一页。那么最后，其实我们想给出的一个启示是什么呢？就是从目前来看，这个系统还是一个非常复杂的系统。左边这个三角形的图，如果我们仅仅是以二氧化碳的排放，或者是其他的温室气体的当量排放来进行一个计算的话，和我们以人群健康的影响，或者是以这个贸易的占比占全球的比例来看，都会得到不一样的占比。也就是说，我们用什么样的视角去建立一个海运排放和真正的驱动力的关系，将会影响到我们未来的选择。这就是我们这个研究所给出的一点启发。最后这一页图呢，是我们想说的是，由于我们现在已经进入了这个人类世，就是 Anthropocene 这个时代，所以在这个人类世的视角下，我们是要跳出技术的本身，而去看人类圈和各个圈层，包括大气圈和水圈等等这些圈层的这个交互作用。所以这也是我们这个研究的一个出发点。好的，谢谢。Thank you。
好，非常感谢刘老师给我们做的从贸易视角构建航运减排责任这样一个非常独特的分析视角。那么今天我们在前面的发言当中，有我来自美国环保协会欧洲办公室的伊法介绍了航运减排战略的挑战，我们来自挪威传奇社来介绍了从能源方面的这个思考。刚才刘老师的片子当中，大家看到一个很有意思的，就是中美贸易当中，那么潜在产生带来污染。所以我想，在我们说到这个绿色航运当中，非常重要的一个环节就是关于港口的建设。那么下边我们非常荣幸的请到了卢旭阳主任，深圳市人大常委会城市建设和环境资源保护工作委员会的副主任，来为我们介绍应该说在中国走到最前列的深圳的绿色港口的建设。卢主任，请。
你好，各位嘉宾，晚上好，早上好，上午好，非常高兴能够在会上分享深圳在船舶减排方面的实际案例。我也有幸呢，从开始就参与和谋划了深圳市船舶污染防治的工作。 这项工作不仅改善了大气环境，也同时减少了航运业的碳排放。那么我所讲的呢有6个方面的主要内容首先呢是介绍一下深圳港的情况。那么深圳呢拥有东西2个港区，包括4个集装箱码头和8个内河港区。这个是全球的第4大集装箱的港口。船舶的污染排放占到了整个咱们深圳市的排放的10%左右。那么集装箱船舶是这个咱们船舶排放的这个最主要的部分，那么它占到了深圳市的船舶的排放总量的60%以上，就是远洋的集装箱船的船舶排放比较大。那么在2015年的时候呢，船舶排放的PM 2.5 氮氧后二氧化硫，它分别是0.14万吨、1.6万吨和1.3万吨，分别占到了深圳本地污染源的11%、16%和70%，尤其是二氧化硫，它是深圳排放的最核心的一个污染源。那么我们通过对原解析的结果，在2014年的时候，那是原解析了，我们发现，它的这个一次颗粒物的贡献在2个微克左右，综合的贡献在4个微克左右。当时深圳的总的这个2.5的浓度呢，大概是35左右这个40左右39，那么这个呢，就是说占到了本地相当大的一个排放的贡献。第二个呢，因为咱们深圳船舶已经成为了一个比较重要的污染源，所以呢，我们也开展了一系列的治理工作。其中最核心的工作呢，就是对远洋船舶的污染治理。对远洋船舶污染治理也是主要2个方面，一个是使用低硫的燃油，第二个是使用岸电。深圳市呢，在这2个方面都有一些这个最开始都是自愿的阶段，就是我们鼓励船舶在靠泊或者是在进入我们的领海排放控制区的时候使用低硫的燃油。在后来呢，我们提前或者在交通部全国一致的情况下，那么强制船舶在靠泊或者是巡航的阶段，就是进入我们的领海排放控制区的时候，使用这个低硫的燃油。同时呢，也鼓励他们使用比国家要求的更高标准的一个燃油。岸电也是这样那么在这个为了鼓励船舶使用低硫的燃油和岸电，我们呢也制定了一系列的鼓励的政策，那么进行补贴那么在这个使用岸电和低硫油的过程中呢，我们补贴的量呢还是非常大的，减排各类污染物呢也是非常明显。为了监督船舶在这个深圳港的排放情况呢，我们建立了一个排放的监测系统，这个是盐田港的情况。那么我们在岸上建了4个的岸基工作这个监测站，在海上也建立了一个航标监测站以及这个执法监督船上有这个船载的监测站。另外呢，还利用无人机进行监测，这样通过咱们初步的筛选出二氧化硫浓度异常的船舶，然后呢再进行登船的检查。另外呢，我们也对港口的设施进行了预设的改造，主要包括港座机械、港座的船舶、内运的拖车这3大类。那么我们主要的改造的这些港座设施呢，第一个是全部的龙门吊，就是吊运集装箱的这个港区的这种大型的吊车，全部改用了电力，有少量的改成了混合动力。有600多台港口的内拖改用了 LNG 的清洁燃料。部分的这个5吨以下的堆高机全部改成了咱们的这个电力的。那么比较大功率的堆高机呢，我们更换了它的发动机，柴油发动机变成了更高标准的国5左右、国6的这个排放标准。另外呢，我们对老旧的拖船进行了淘汰，实验呢用燃气和电动的船舶来替代这些老旧船舶。同时呢，在这个港口的岸电设施方面呢，我们截止到19年底，整个深圳港呢建成了21套岸电设施，覆盖了42个深水泊位。岸电泊位的覆盖率和使用率呢，都是全国的沿海港口的首位。 同时呢，我们也进行了运输结构的一个调整。运输结构的调整呢，主要是用铁路和这个咱们看到的驳船来替代我们的集装箱的公路运输。那么从2016年起呢，我们进行了一个深圳组合港绿色港口店的一个项目。那么目前呢，我们已经是开通了18个内河码头，覆盖了52个珠三角的这个内河的驳船的航线。19年的时候呢，集装箱驳船的吞吐量呢达到了463万标箱。在深圳港的这个绿色建设的过程中呢，我们18年和15年比，我们的船舶靠泊期间的二氧化硫减排了95%，颗粒物减排了81%，转用低硫燃油累计减排1.2万吨二氧化硫，842吨氮氧化和822吨的颗粒物。同时呢，咱们的东部港区明显的在夏季，2018年就这个17年这2年的夏季的二氧化硫的平均浓度比2016年降低了4.8微克和3.6微克。深圳港船舶排放的大气污染物占本地2.5的这个污染源的比例呢，从14年的11%下降到了6%。同时呢，港口的单位生产的碳排放强度也下降了61%，就是每一个集装箱它的运输在港口的这个装卸的过程中的碳排放强度下降了61%。那么政府在绿色港口的建设中呢，主要是颁布政策文件，组织引导，同时呢给予补贴。从2015年3月到19年的6月，累计发放了靠港船舶的岸天补贴2335万元，转油的低硫油的补贴8329万元，岸电建设补贴5200多万元，一共是1.5亿多人民币。在“十四五”期间呢，深圳的绿色港口建设呢，我们还有4个主要方面的工作。第一个呢，就是要建设集装箱的内陆港。这个呢，交通部最近在这个2020的5月85号文件里面已经明确的批复，深圳可能在我们的这个内陆的这个东莞市的漓光建设内陆港。这个内陆港呢，是通过铁路把集装箱的运到内地，然后再从内地再用拖车导运到用户。第二个呢，就是建设一个船舶的大气污染排放控制监管区，这是交通部海事局和深圳市政府以及香港特别行政区的环境局共同发起的，在大鹏湾建设全国的一个示范区。第三个呢，就是我们还会建一个国际海上的 LNG 的加注中心，这个要让深圳呢，继这个新加坡、荷兰鹿特冈之后呢，咱们成为国际上的首批的海上 LNG 的加注中心，这样建设我们的绿色枢纽港。最后一个呢，我们也会进一步的推动专属经济海域的排放控制区的扩大的问题。这个我们也多次跟交通部请示和协调，希望能够把我们的现代排放控制区进一步的扩展到我们的专属经济海区100或者200海里。我的这个交流完毕，谢谢。
好，非常感谢卢主任给我们做的非常精彩的发言和对深圳港的介绍。那么刚才我们4位专家的发言都很精彩，通过各位专家的发言报告，我们对绿色航运、绿色货物、绿色油料、绿色港口像几个话题都有了一些初步的了解。那么下面我们进入更精彩的对话环节，那么期待着大家的积极参与。而且在我看到刚才发言的这些专家现在都还在场，那么也欢迎大家呢用我们 Zoom 的这个 chat 功能来提出问题，我们的工作人员也会收集这些问题，希望能让这些专家来进行这个回答。那么我们今天呢为这个讨论环节呢还提了一些我们建议的话题，包括有这么几个方面，比如说对欧盟考虑将国际航运纳入碳市场的看法啦，绿色航运发展面临的障碍和未来的期望啦，绿色航运和绿色港口发展的展望啦，航运温室气体减排与航口污染综合治理啦，绿色航运国际和区域合作机遇啊， 实现这个 IMO 2050中长期路径和更有雄目标的可能性啊。那么甚至包括这个在疫后重建，我们现在经常谈到绿色复苏当中，那么绿色航运和发展的机遇。当然，我觉得最主要的，可能在我们设计这个话题的时候还没有想到的，就是在一开始这个几位嘉宾都提到的，习主席做出的中国2030年达峰和2060实现碳中和这样的一个更具有雄心的目标，那对我们绿色航运会产生哪些影响？刚才大家在这个刘欢老师和这个卢主任介绍当中都探到和听到了，那么航运愈发的在全球碳排放当中起到的重要的地位。那么我们请到了就是邀请的4位参与讨论的嘉宾，一位是蔡梅江，中国远洋航运集团专职外部董事 COSCO， 一位是庄伟，波罗的海国际航运工会亚洲区经理。那么我们的 Camille 是 IMO 的海洋环境处官员，和刘欢老师，那么也继续留下来参与我们的讨论。那好，这个我就不再多说。那么首先请出我们的Captain 蔡总，您刚才听了这些介绍之后，不知道这些情况您是不是都已经了解，和COSCO 从的角度，特别是习总书记做出这个新的对国际社会承诺之后，有没有一些新的考虑？蔡总，请。
大家好啊，这个刚才听了几位嘉宾在演讲，也很受启发啊。我先给大家分享这个数据，然后呢再讲几个观点吧。我们中远海运集团嘛，因为是全球最大的航运企业首先拥有控制船的超过1000艘。我们去年2019年，我们的这个整个能源消耗呢同比下降了0.13%。那么整个二氧化碳的排放度呢，我们同比下降了8.97%。氮氧化物的排放度呢是千吨海里0.015同比下降了93%。也就是说，这几年这个随着船队结构的调整，和低沥油的逐步使用实际上整个排放是在减少的我想这个数字给大家讲，也就是从我们整个集团从岸基管理到船舶对于这个绿色航运还是积极开放和积极争取这么一个态度这第一个第二呢，我们采取的主要措施呢，应该这几年，一个呢，船队的大规模的结构调整，也就是船龄的年轻化第二个呢，我们也大力的利用岸电刚才深圳的一位副总裁也讲到了，就是我们只要有条件的地方我们大型的集装箱都是使用岸电在一些这个内河有些小型船舶呢，已经在逐步推广 LNG 的使用我们还呢保持每年夏季的北极的常态化那么今年我们又走了11个北极航次还有一个我们开发一些能效管理也就是怎么来通过管理和调整船舶的吃水来提升这个船舶的一个速度和营运效率这个呢也是说也起到了一定的效果，所以这2年这个燃油的一个消耗千吨海里的消耗呢是下降比较快这是几个措施。刚才也讲了几个问题我们听了大家以后，我就这么几个问题这个我们航运是世界上也是最大的整个全球供应链当中是不可或缺的一环，而且所承担的全球的运输量是最大的。但是呢，现在这几年做的政策呢，我觉得是不太系统性，不够协同性。比如这个压载水公约，压载水，我们这2年发现这个压载水，特别是大型船舶的压载水安装以后这个用电量特别多，用电特别多呢，也就是消耗的能源比原来的要高出了许多。也就是说，你搞了个压载水工业，我们搞了压载水，但是呢，电这个增加了消耗能耗，这里反过来也增加了排放这是一个。第二个呢，就是我现在来看，我们是为整个全球的贸易服务的。那么现在可用的技术、可用替代的能源这个可供应的整个随手可完善的供应网络，在全球还是不够完善的这个不够完善的，所以很多不是我们传统不愿意使用新技术，不愿意用更清洁的燃料，而是没有找到更经济高效的这么一个东西 也就是说岸电、LNG 使用等等，现在目前来看还是不是太完善啊。这个当然了，最后第4个还是个人才，就是对于排放啊，对这种技术研发这个人才方面的还是缺乏有效的一个培训和那个啊。当然了，还有一个像这种这个新能源的应用、新技术的研发整个成本是上升了。那么这种成本是由船东一家来承担，我觉得这可能也不是太合理啊。所以我想啊，先简单讲我这么几个数据分享和讲那么几个观点。我先讲那么多。
好，谢谢蔡总。这个我们跟蔡总虽然还没有这个物理上见过面，但已经是老朋友了，在几次会上都见到。蔡总一会儿期待着参与我们的讨论。刚才谈到一个非常重要的问题，其实一会儿我们可能也会问我们的刘欢老师，就是在考虑这个排放的时候，是不是要从一个这个全生命周期来考虑这个排放？比如说你刚才谈到了压舱水的问题和带来的更多电耗的问题，此消彼长的这样的一种这个平衡的关系。我想其实这个问题在特别对港口的这个污染和这个碳减排方面，其实也会产生相应的影响。那么我们下一位请出我们的这个庄伟先生，他是这个 Regional Manager of Asia， 应该叫做 BIMCO 吧，就是波罗的海航运工会经理。庄先生，我想大家对你这个身份都非常好奇哈，特别对我们不搞航运的人，不知道您是不是可以先介绍一下自己和这个波罗的海国际航运工会是具体做管什么样的事儿的，然后再谈谈您的观点。庄先生，请。
谢谢啊。实际上 BIMCO 呢是全球最大的一个国际航运组织，那么在全球有2000多个会员，来自120多个国家和地区，其中将近900多是船东。那么我这边呢是加入 BIMCO 是从2011年在 BIMCO 的总部丹麦，后来就会回到国内，然后成立一个代表处。我们日常主要是为船公司，也包括我们中远海运实际上大大小小的航运公司，也包括像船舶的代理人租船经纪人，包括保费协会，也包括船级社，就类似于大的一个航运的俱乐部，是通过信息和资讯来维护整个一个行业的健康发展。那么主要呢还是谈一下今天我们这个议题。那么结合自己是一个工作，我觉得目前我们在讲这个航运里面的阶级的问题，可能有以下的几个值得我们去思考一下。那第一个呢，实际上整个的航运，如果我们看从2008年到2018年的这10年间，整个海运的一个贸易量是增加了40%，但根据我们的统计的航运的减排，实际上同期是降低了7%。换句话来讲，航运的减排还是做得不错的。第二个呢，我们一直在讲一个解决的方案，包括 IMO 也提出了非常清晰的路线图。但是作为一个船东或者是船东为主的这么一个航运组织，我们的一个观点是什么呢？就是说，我们往往是抛出一个问题，然后呢，让船东去你来找答案。但问题在于你现实过程当中，刚才包括我也听到专家讲到 ，the ship owner you need to find out how， 这是一个很现实的问题。我们在讲到 2050怎么去减排，2030 zero carbon ship should it be in place， 就是应当要可以。但是反过来摆在船东面前的是说 ，OK。我用什么样的一个燃料油，我什么样的技术手段是可行的？提到了是我们所讲的也是 ammonia 也好 ，hydrogen 也好，也提到了 LNG 也好。但是每一个实际上我们在提出这样一个概念，从它一开始的一个科学研究，到最后能够真正的应用场景到一艘船上，这个时间和这个背后的一个成本的考量，实际上对于船东来讲是比较煎熬的。举个简单的例子来讲，如果我现在作为一个投资方，我要去造一艘船，当然我们现在每一艘船它的一个寿命比原来要短很多，但是我们暂且说它15年。那么我怎么样确保我现在 我要投巨资融资造的这个一艘船，在它未来可预见的15年的期间是能够合规的，而且能够保持它的营运的一个竞争力的。这是一个非常淳朴的一个想法，对船东来讲。但是实际上的选项好几种，但是可能就没有能够落地。所以呢，我们一路也在呼吁，就是说，我们不需要那种 aspirational objective. We needed to find a solution which is workable, affordable, and practical. 这个我相信是最核心的一个关键词。另外还有一点，我这里也想要补充一下的是什么呢？我们近期也是看到了欧盟在推进在欧盟领域内的将航运纳入这么一个我们所讲的 ETS 的系统。当然，这个仍然是要等明年春天我们看最后的结果。对于这样一个东西，我们是非常失望和非常担忧的。为什么呢？因为航运实际上我们是一个全球化的，就承载了90%的海上的贸易，它是一个全球的这么一种行业运输。然后呢，我们是需要有一个标准化的、国际化的、一体化的、可执行的。而我们现在看到，实际上 IMO 在整个国际的减排这个方面，它的表现还是不错的。举一个眼下的我们刚刚经历的一个例子，包括之前也是为了应对我们所讲环境的变化 ，IMO 在2020年真正的开始执行关于低硫燃油，当然它那个是为了解决硫含量的一个问题。那么从一开始的大家都觉得不知道怎么办，甚至一开始担心，这个油商他们是不是能够提供足够的合规的低硫燃油，也包括是最后在想，我这个船公司应该怎么去切换燃油等等等等。但是从这个由 IMO 来引导的这么一个，我们把它称为的2020的 Silver Cap 这个路径来看，实际上是执行的不错的。也就是说 IMO 是可靠的，而且是可以执行的。那么在这种背景下，如果说让欧盟它自己来单方的采取行动，势必会挑战 IMO 本身它的国际的这么一个我们所讲的一个机构，它所制定国际的规范的一个权威性，也势必会导致一些区域采取同样的一个措施，甚至会影响整个一个全球的一个减排的一个效果。所以这一点我们是非常关注，而且是觉得似乎是忘了真正船公司的一个声音，所以也是比较遗憾啊。那么关于在 IMO 的整个减排里面，实际上刚才我们的 Kamala 也提到过，实际上我们冰葵也在里面跟 ICS 等等一起，我们也是提出了一个decarbonization 一个 fund 的一个概念，也就是说试图需要通过一个市场的一个手段，能够短期内能够寻找到这样的一个资金，来解决或者说来鼓励航运业当中的一个技术革新，以期待着我们2030年确实可以尽快的找到一个解决方案。要不我先就讲这么多吧。
好，非常感谢庄先生。Well, this is getting really interesting, and I think committee, these questions almost all target at you. The IMO, you're both being praised for your leadership in the sulfur issue, but you also being, I won't say blamed, but at least questioned about the technicality and practicality of the solution to the aspirational target that IMO came out. So maybe you can help us shed some light on what you're thinking about the real practical technical solution to those targets that IMO has been facilitating?
Excellent. Okay, should I speak now? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Well, first, I think I should say thank you to Mr. Wei. I think I agree with most of what he's saying. Maybe I should recall also that IMO, before all, is its member states and its organizations as well, including BIMCO. I am a member of the IMO Secretariat, and my work is to facilitate the work of the member states. And I'm here trying to reflect the progress at IMO. But I just wanted to recall that above all, IMO is made of its member states, and it's the product of intergovernmental cooperation. There's many aspects in various of the points that have been highlighted. The importance to provide confidence to both ship owners, investors, is I think one of the reasons why the IMO member states wanted to adopt a strategy, which is first of all a statement. It does not include any mandatory binding requirements for the ship, contrary to, for example, the MARPOL Convention. But it really is a signal sent to the outside world and also to shipping in general of where IMO member states want to go, and thus giving some confidence and a direction to the overall maritime supply chains and stakeholders. And to come back to what I said before, I think we are quite happy to see that since adoption of the strategy, many people actually embarked in this voyage and started to initiate various research projects, etc., etc. So things are moving. Things, I have to say, are probably not moving fast enough, considering the urgency of climate change. But it's. I mean, I'm encouraged to see so many countries, organizations engaged in IMO to work towards workable, realistic solutions, and also, yeah, again, IMO 2020 I think went rather smoothly, and certainly because it was well prepared. An important piece of work was achieved in recent years to develop guidelines to ensure a consistent implementation of the sulfur regulation, and we hope that with this continuing history and tradition, I should say, at IMO of technical work, we will succeed also on the decarbonization pathway. Maybe a word on the EU ETS, because I think this was mentioned. We are, of course, closely looking at what's happening in the EU regarding shipping's inclusion in the ETS, but also the Green New Deal. Well, you won't be surprised that I say that the objective of the IMO is to create a body of regulation for ships that is globally adopted and consistently enforced. We see that there's a risk that unilateral or regional schemes, regulations could conflict with global IMO regulations and actually frustrate its objectives. It was said, but I think it's worth recalling that ships trade internationally and that they must be regulated on a global basis. But also, I should say that the IMO strategy envisages, in addition to its vision and to its levels of ambition, a list of candidate measures with timelines in the short term, in the midterm, and in the long term. And it envisages in the midterm, and the midterm is between 2023 and 2030, to consider market-based measures as a possible measure to reduce GHG emissions from shipping. So we are ready to I think consider these measures. It's becoming more and more clear, I think, that in order for low and zero carbon fuels and technology to massively uptake, there would be a need to address the cost competitiveness issue. But again, we want to do that, I think, in a workable and realistic way. I think we are waiting for member states to develop and bring their own proposals, including EU member states, because they are all IMO member states, and bring them to the IMO for discussion.
Yeah, may I just give a comment?
Please, thank you very much. Yeah, 庄先生，来 please.
Yeah, because you just also mentioned about the EU, the ETS. As far as I understand, actually, there's some kind of debate in the market that, okay, it could be another story. If you look at a couple of years ago, the aviation, they also wanted to put the aviation into the ETS system. But however, for some reason, it failed. And now the shipping peers, they think, okay, perhaps we could follow suit. But my concern is, if you look at the real intention, the rationale behind this recent round about EU's motives, I happened to read a paper that mentioned that actually the EU is, they intend to use this kind of plan to sort out their COVID hit the economic recovery. So there's a paper that clearly mentioned that, okay, that's dated to 2020, the May the 27th. That is Europe's moment. The possible additional own resources to be added as a later stage of the 2021 to 2027 financial period, extension the emission trading system based on resources to the maritime and the aviation sectors to generate euro 10 billion per year. So that back to my concern, I think is now the scenario is different when we compare a couple of years about the aviation. And also now the picture, I would not say deglobalization, but we know now the big trade war and also the local protectionism here and there. So can we just find some ways, especially from development countries and also did the same approach to push back the EU to make a change? As we don't think this ETS to put the international shipping into this basket will be a suitable and a sensible solution. This is my personal view.
Well, Ms. Strong, thank you very much. And I think that's actually really interesting, but I really want to get my colleague, Eva, you're still on, your take on the practical solution part. And also, Ms. Strong just mentioned about the ICAO. I think people are certainly all very curious about the analogy and comparability of the IMO approach with regard to the ICAO approach. And also, Eric, if you're still on, I would like you to take a perspective with regard to this role that EU is trying to this global vision. So I don't know whether Eva, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm very happy to come in. I'm getting quite a bit of background noise. I don't know if...
One second.
I think we should mute when we discuss.
大家哪一位不说话，请先 mute 一下哈。Okay, Eva, you're on. Yeah.
No worries. So I guess there's a few things to say in terms of the EU and the ETS. So first of all, it is right that if shipping is put in the emissions trading system, money will be raised. The EU has clearly signaled that they want to invest in zero emission shipping. And as I mentioned in my presentation, only through investment in zero emission shipping will that actually become cheap enough and competitive enough for the entire shipping industry. If people or countries want to stop the EU putting shipping in the emissions trading system, and honestly, I'm totally on your side here, but the only way to do that is to move quickly. You mentioned aviation going into the emissions trading system, and that was 10 years ago. And now we've lost 10 years to climate in terms of shipping. And unfortunately, very little has been done. So there's this proposal from the industry to put a $2 levy on all shipping fuel. Now that is going to go into research and development for the shipping industry. And I hope that it will. I just think that $2 is not enough and won't actually get shipping down to even minus 50%, though actually, as I said, that's not in line with Paris. And I think in line, there was a question there from one of the participants, really interestingly. We heard at the top about China's announcement of net zero for 2060, which is really, really exciting and great. And the question now is, will shipping match that? Unfortunately, it's going to cost someone something. It's not going to be a free transition, and shipping has to step up and pay its way. It's perfectly in line with international law for the EU to put shipping in the emissions trading system. And unless there's a lot more ambition from the industry itself and the member states of the IMO, then the EU is going to be a climate champion and it's going to go forward with shipping. So the best thing I can say is, if we want to stop the EU, then become more ambitious and work harder at getting to zero emission shipping globally first.
Well, Aoife, thank you very much. And Eric, if you're still on, maybe you can comment a little bit on this whole EU behavior. Is that a conspiracy, or you think EU is really, really truthfully and committed to this global climate commitment? I think you're probably in the best position to talk about it. Eric, you still on? Eric?
I have been listening very carefully to the discussion, and let me just say that I'm no expert on this particular issue, but I think we should applaud when parts of the world wants to be pioneers and go up in the front. There is a very, very strong movement towards green solutions in Europe at the moment. That's for different reasons. I mean, because the public opinion in Europe through elections has shown a strong desire for green solutions. Political leaders are stepping up, but they also see going green as a way of saving the kind of European project. I mean, this is one of the areas where joint efforts from Europe is popular among voters and can be carried away. So I think we should expect the European Union to take a lead. If parts of the world want to go in the front, we should applaud. A few years back, the European Union did exactly the opposite. I mean, they said that China is subsidizing solar industry, and that's bad, and we should clamp down on that. I then took the view, no, this is good. If China is subsidizing the solar industry, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity. It means China will move very fast into the solar, and Europe should applaud it. What's bad in the world, of course, is that we are subsidizing fossil fuels, and we still do that massively in different ways in most parts of the world. So exactly in the same way as Europe should have applauded Chinese subsidies to the solar industry, the rest of the world should applaud if Europe is taking the lead in this area. And while there is a huge momentum in business now to move into the green, still government regulations are very often needed to make sure that there are no free riders and to give a premium to those who move fast. I think wherever at the national or international level, we can embark upon the principles which we did in Norway to move our ferries into electric, that should be done. And I repeat that, we did set up a fund for the fishing fleet and the ship owners. The ship owners and the fishing fleet owners, they were contributing to that fund in accordance with their emissions. So the higher emissions, the more you contributed. And then the opposite was also the case. Every single yuan or euro or kroner who came out of the fund was moved into the new technologies for green shipping and green ferries. And that then you had a double effect. The more you polluted, the more you paid. The faster you moved into the green solutions, the more you gained. And it had massive impact. And Norway is now for sure the global leader on electric ferries. We have any number of electric ferries now crossing our fjords. But I think the principles here can be applied both at the regional and global level. The more you can make the polluter pays, and the more you can support those.
Yeah, thank you very much. And for those who do not know, Eric just being really modest, he served both in the Norwegian Parliament and also most recently was the executive director of the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. So he's certainly probably one of the most authoritative person to comment on these interaction between a fraction part of the world and with the global goal. 蔡总，这个我们 上次谈的时候，您专门谈到了关于船的这个 ownership 在发生巨大的变化，就是现在很多时候是金融机构在拥有这个船体，而不光是这个就是船主自己本身。上次我们也讨论了绿色金融，也有说海洋叫 blue 这个 finance 进展的情况。那么刚才您听到了这些讨论，关于这个就是说目标已经设计出来，但是呢，实际的解决方案可能还有待时日发展。那从一个船主的角度和船运公司角度，您是怎么来看待这个问题？您能帮我们说两句吗？蔡总，请。
好的，刚才听了很受启发，特别是艾利克啊，对，从全球联合国角度，确实未来能源机构的替代，这是一个大方向，这是全人类的对这个应对气候变化的一个集体行动和集体意志啊，这个呢应该是很好的一件事。那么但是我们回到现实来看呢，就是这个行业这个能源，我们现在通过现有的技术啊。相关的港航联合啊，用岸电啊这些步骤来讲呢，不可能的达到2050的全面的这个达到50%的下降，所以要有更多的技术、更多的替代方案啊。我想这一个，那么确实现在首先这个现在的石化燃料来看啊，这个不管低流油也好，还是存在的排放的。那么从源头上，据我了解啊，实际上这个石油从它开采的时候排到空气当中，这个释放从的呼吸当中啊，排放是非常严重的。然后在它的储存当中，特别现在有一些在海上进行储存，也是有相当大的排放的。当然了，最后我们调合成燃料油，在燃烧当中产生动力当中也是排放的。所以说，从开采到储存、运输和动力这一系列。实际上都应该要加以控制，所以刚才要成立一个基金啊，从我们船东啊责无旁贷，但是呢，从石油的开采企业、储存企业、加工企业，恐怕也要加入这一个团队，组建一个基金，这是我第一个观点啊。第二个呢，确实啊，这个还是这个目前这个船东的角色呢在改变啊，也就是从现在我们的船大部分是通过银行是。来融资租赁过来的，所以我们已经变为第二船东，第一船东已经是大的金融机构，所以说金融机构，那么它的融资当中在有倾向性、导向性，支持绿色行业的一个行动要落实到它的资金的一个导向上，我想这一个也是未来可以考虑的啊。第三个呢，我觉得刚才也讲了，就是航运是为全人类的贸易和服务的，所以我觉得无论我们港航合作。还是南合作，还是一带一路的合作，对我们解决这个行业的绿色航运啊、港口的航运和绿色的海洋啊，我觉得确实是一个需要大家都要有这种共识啊。仅仅说 IM 出规定，让我刚才这个张伟讲的很好，就是经常是出一个规定，让我们船东自己想办法，然后呢就给我们一个很大的极限。比如说这个低流油的问题，那么低流油到底是生产低流油还是安装脱硫塔 ？IM 他不说啊，让你们船东自己想办法。所以呢，去年呢大量的安装了脱硫塔。那么脱硫塔出来的硫，集中起来送到岸上，有人接收吗？会不会产生第二次污染呢？哦，你船东自己解决。所以我们船东呢又是一个移动的船。他在本国我还可以解决一些问题，我到别的地方我就很多问题是解决不了的，所以这里边啊是一个系统化来考虑问题。所以我觉得啊，无论从技术，还从资金，从船东，从石化燃料的替代啊，我觉得这个要有这个全方位的这么一个来解决方案。当然了，目标已经明确，特别是我们习主席就到2060中国达到了碳中和这个目标。那么我想从未来还有一定的时间。啊，如何在技术上的突破啊，在资金向绿色的能源、替代的能源去倾斜我还是要强调一点，就是人才啊，人才这个解决这个海员的这个群体，解决港航操作的群体，解决跟石化燃料和未来保持低碳生活的这种人才也是非常重要的。那么解决人的一个绿色操作也是非常重要的。我就补充这么多。
好，蔡总，非常感谢您作为一个船东角度给我们的信心，这个和支持，讲了诸多方面。那么您刚才谈到人才，我们给您请出一位我们最大的人才，就是我们清华的刘欢教授。 这个刘教授刚才其实只用简短的时间谈了一下从全生命周期角度，不管是问题还是说问题的责任的分担，还是解决问题的入手点。那么刘教授，可能刚才听到我们深圳卢主任的介绍，我希望能够给增点一点信心，就是中国的这样的一个港口，其实在至少以空气质量改善为基础，已经采取了这么多的这个措施，但是可能您可以帮我们更加更加的这个具体分析一下，在整个航运这条的价值链上和污染链上，那么现在推出的这样以船为主的解决问题，我指的低碳问题，是不是一个公平的解决方案？是不是还是应该把这个责任更多的进行分担？刘教授，请。
好的，谢谢您。的确是，刚才听了卢主任的报告，其实深圳一直以来都是咱们国家在中国在这个清洁航运或者是清洁港口方面的这样一个领军者的这个角色。所以我们看到，其实深圳现在的 PM2.5的浓度是每年都在下降的，就蓝天的比例是越来越高。所以这是一个真真实实的从采取行动到见到效益的这样一个好的这个例子。然后刚才也听了几位发言人的这个讲话，也是有很多的这个触动。我自己的这个感受呢，就是在我们推进不管是低碳还是蓝天，就其实这两个现在是要协同来推进的。因为作为中国一个发展中国家来讲，我们不仅是面临着这样一个低碳的挑战，其实这个蓝天的一个挑战，就是要减常规的污染物，这个挑战也还是仍然很大的。所以我现在的这个感觉呢是整个对于航运来讲，由于可能前期的研究，其实它是不如陆地源充分的，也就不如在这个陆地上的这个污染源的相关研究充分的。那这个研究的不充分带来的问题，就是会有一系列的这个问题。它比如说技术的这个成熟度和对整个这个系统的一个规划和设计，现在正在这个快速发展的一个过程当中，所以刚才会带来像Captain 蔡还有这个庄先生提到的这样一些问题。但是好在呢，我们大家是有一个很好的一个共识，就是面临的这个气候变化还是一个全人类的一个挑战，特别是这些年，这个不仅是气候变暖，而且我们可以看到气候变乱，这个情况已经出现的是越来越频繁了。所以从这个角度来讲，我们大家是要朝着这一个方向去努力的。那么我们自己清华呢，之前在移动源的这个管理方面做了一些研究工作，所以我把有一些在陆地上的移动源的经验，如果移植到这个船舶里来讲，我觉得还有几件事儿是很需要在近期来做完的。就比如说第一个，就是我还是在讲这个系统性的一个规划，这个呢不仅是需要由 IMO 来解决，其实更多的是要有有一个系列的这个研究者来共同来完成。那这包括什么呢？就是我们比如说在陆地上要对车提出一套排放标准，这个前期是要给到车企一定的技术准备时间的。这个在各个国家都是这样，那要基于现有的技术，一定的技术储备的时间，然后提前发布这样的一个标准，使得他们能够在技术上达到。那么同时呢，还有一个问题，就是我们的政策体系是不是完备？比如说监管，如果说我们要求了，举个最简单的例子，就是2020年的这个硫的标准，那么硫的标准的监管怎么样做到位？如果我们的船东能够提前知道这会是一个非常有效的一个监管体系，也就意味着这会是一个公平的竞争体系。那么这时候他再去安装，比如说脱硫塔，或者是遵照这个规定使用这个低硫的燃油，它的这积极性是会提高的，因为我们要防止在这个过程中出现这种劣币驱逐良币的这样一个现象。然后再一个呢，就是我们说的全生命周期的这样一个核算。从全生命周期来看，刚才也提到，比如说油的上游的这个来源是什么？在油的开采过程中和储藏过程中，它也会有这个挥发性的有机物的排放，以及包括我们如果用电，那么电它的来源是什么？但是我们相信呢，比如说海上的这个风电的这些应用，光伏的这个应用，整个这些来说，大的这个趋势是在朝这个好的方向在走。同时还有一个问题就是。 在我们预测这个未来的时候，其实我们经常会分为几个这个影响的条件来预测。刚才大家提到了技术，提到了能源，提到了就技术包括这个能耗哈。那么还有一点，我觉得很重要的是这个社会和经济这个方面。那么我们现在的有没有在社会和经济上去挖掘从根源上削减的这个潜力呢？我觉得还这一部分的潜力其实还是很大的，是可以挖掘的。比如说现在最简单的一个例子，就是在中国最近都很流行做一件什么事儿呢？就是不浪费饭菜，这是最近在做的一件事儿。那比如说我们学校的食堂现在都推出的菜的和饭的分量都非常的小，那么就这一项能够节约下来的总的能源其实是很大的。所以如果我们整个的这个生活方式的这个改变和整个经济的上的有效的促进，像我刚才讲这个，因为时间关系我没有讲得太细，其中有很大一部分的中美之间的一个碳排放，美国到中国的是运送的是垃圾。那么这一部分其实完全没有必要进行运输的，它虽然它是经济链中的一个环节，但它并不是一个有效的环节。所以从这些根源的地方，如果把它们给取消掉的话，或者是减少的话，仍然是一个这个碳减排的这样一个驱动力。所以我是觉得现在需要从多个方面做系统性的这样一个规划。
刘老师非常感谢这个系统性的规划 （holistic approach）。I think that's really important. And Tori from DNVL, I don't know whether you're still on, but being the largest certification third party for shipbuilding, I wonder whether you also want to comment further on the practical solution aspect of some of the questions that were raised. Tori?
Yes.
Please.
Yes. I need to think a little bit on an answer. I came a little bit abruptly. I was looking at something else here. Okay. So, yeah, could you just repeat the question for me so I can
the question on you mentioned about blue ammonia, biomethanol, all those possible solutions to reduce carbon from the shipping industry. And you heard some of the earlier questions raised. We're discussing about the practicality of the solution. IMO raised the target 2050 and 2030, but there's a question on whether the solution is there, because building a ship takes a long time to plan, to design, and to build. And we can't build on something based on fantasy, or the solution has to be there to be practical. So we're looking for you to give us some affirmative answer to tell us the answer is actually there or not.
Yes, thank you. Then no, I'm with you. It's a very good question, because it's in one end, I don't think the technical aspect is the most critical. The most critical thing is to have a fuel that we can burn, because if you don't have a carbon neutral fuel, be it a biofuel or a zero carbon fuel, we will not be able to decarbonize. So, and engine technology or fuel set technology, that's I don't think that's the big obstacle. Of course, it has to be developed. We need the regulation to enable to do it safely. But it's it's the fuel that's the issue, and also to distribute that fuel, the infrastructure of that fuel. And always kind of it's a little bit depressing, but we started with the first LNG fueled ferry in 2001, and it has taken 20 years. Of course, there are different drivers. It's not a zero carbon fuel, but at the same time, it's been a fuel that's in many ways cheaper to use, but it's still taken a long time to develop that. If you're going to solve this problem for decarbonization, we need to move very much quicker. And even if you can have an engine that can run on ammonia in 5 years, we need to scale up that to have actually ship owners to use it, and to use it, they need to be sure that they actually have ammonia available that they can be used. So it's very much a chicken and egg. So the practicalities is around making that fuel available and not the technology.
Yeah, since you're on, actually, there is also a question from the chat room asking about hydrogen. I wonder whether you can also comment a little bit on the hydrogen. Could that also be a possible solution for all the challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, well, when I say ammonia, hydrogen is the key component in making that ammonia. It's just that hydrogen takes a lot of space. So for a lot of shipping, the deep sea shipping, it's takes too much volume. So then it could be better to make it into ammonia and burn that. For smaller vessels that doesn't have that range requirements, hydrogen could be used directly, as we see for some of the ferries that's being developed now. But having blue or green hydrogen produced somewhere, that's critical, because that's the key component, unless you have biomass available.
Yeah, I think this point actually is really important. Both you and Captain Tsai raised that you cannot solve the problem just by providing a similarly less polluting fuel. You have to go to look at the entire life cycle of how that fuel is produced and what's in totality its carbon footprint. Otherwise, you just replace one form with the other without the final sort of reduction of the carbon footprint. 线上我们谈了一圈，这个大家提供了各方面的观点，不知道您有没有被说服呢？您觉得这个听了这些专家的意见之后，您觉得潜在的能够看到这个解决的希望，从而使得这个船东们或者说船的未来的这些 owner 这些这个 financial institution 能够更快的加速来这种低碳的解决方案了吗？庄先生，庄总在吗？还？
我在，实际上我一直在听。Actually, I think we needed to be clear that the shipping is on its track of evolution. It's quite clear if you overlook the past 10 years, the financial forces has played an essential role and more increasingly important. If you look at this, especially we're talking about China leasing institutions, they're so proactive now in the market, which means that they are virtually the ship owner. And of course, in the shipping industry, we talk about the Posidonia principle. That means the green financial principle, but this is also something on the paper only at this moment. And whenever we talk about the gesture issue, I think we needed to keep an eye on those kind of driving forces.
Okay, well, we definitely need to have the conversation going so that we can get all the stakeholders online to put all our efforts into this solution to this one really critical common challenge that we're all facing right now. 我们大概还有5分钟时间，我想给我们4位这个讨论的嘉宾每个人这个1分钟来这个做一下发言。庄先生刚才已经说完了哈，那么我们下面是不是请这个committee 1 minute to summarize your point and make your best advocacy on behalf of IMO. Committee, please.
Well, thank you. Just to wrap up, I think everyone in its capacity has highlighted the need to enhance cooperation on these issues. From IMO's side, I would say the very immediate priority is to have a global agreement on a short-term measure to reduce the carbon intensity of existing ships, and then, and very soon after that, embark in preparing for the 2050 ambition, which will certainly develop innovative mechanisms, potentially including market-based measures, and we're looking forward to initiate this discussion at the IMO level.
Okay, and Captain Tsai, 蔡总。
好，我用一句话结束我今天的这个讨论啊。我想我们在确保全球供应链稳定和发展的前提下，推进绿色航运，确保2060的碳中和的中国目标的实现。谢谢。
好，谢谢蔡总。刘老师。
好的，我也是两句简短的这个话。第一句呢，我现在是既有信心也有忧虑。有信心是因为我认为在比如说以中国为代表的这一系列大国的这个引领下，这碳减排的目标还是可以达到的。但是有忧虑是什么呢？我觉得我们现在急需要找到能够落实目标的方法，把现有的所有在纸面上讨论的这些指标全都给驱动起来。这是第一句话。第二句话是，我认为航运行业作为现在一个接近3%贡献的这样一个很大的一个群体来说，碳减排和常规污染物的减排，这一定是我们的无悔选择。如果我们到50年以后再回过头来看，我们会觉得我们今天立刻迈出这一步，一定是一个正确的选择。
好，非常感谢刘老师，其实已经替我做出了一个很好的总结。那么大家知道我们这个今晚的活动是 Green Shipping， 那么大家知道 IMO 制定了2050的中长期规划目标，那么到2030年全球海运每单位运输活动的平均二氧化碳排放与2008年相比至少降低40%，那么同时促进国际海运温室气体排放尽快达到峰值。那么2050年温室气体年度总排放量与2008年相比至少减少50%。那么今天各位大咖在一起呢，针对绿色航运和绿色港口的相关话题进行了广泛的交流。那么我想我们大家还是得到了一定的共识哈。如果说我们在组织这个事情的时候，当时心中还有一些这个不确定性和疑问的时候，那么习总书记9月22号在75届联大会议一般辩论上发表的重要讲话，承诺中国尽快在2030年达峰和力争2060实现碳中和。那么我想给予了我们极大的这个信心，而且特别是2060力争达到碳中和这样一个目标，我想我们每一个在座的人其实可能都会讨论和意识到，那是彻底的对我们的至少在中国的生产生活方式的一次彻底的改变。这是这几天大家可能最重要的话题。我想我们航运业也力不容辞，要承担起相应的责任。那么人类社会发展史呢，就是一部不断挑战各种困难和这个艰难的历史。那么我们应该不能够忽视大自然一次又一次的警告，只是索取而不讲投入，只讲发展不讲保护，只讲利用不讲修复。所以我想今天的讨论更意识到，让我们要创新协调绿色发展，各个国家要合作，各个行业要合作，那么各个人也要合作。那么只有这样的话，就如同我的工作的组织美国环保协会的总裁今天发出的他的这个 statement 一样，那么欧洲和中国已经走上了这条低碳的道路。那么现在就看全世界，特别是美国，是不是赶快这个重新投入到这样一个共同的使命当中来。非常感谢大家的参与。那么今天我们的绿色航运讨论就到此结束了。非常感谢各位大咖。那么我们期待着在未来的一系列活动当中， 还能够见到大家就有关的话题在一起进行讨论。我们更希望很快我们能够在这个线下更真正的 face to face 的见到大家，来共同做出我们共同的努力。感谢大家，这个非常谢谢大家对活动的参与。Good night, good morning, good noon, whether you are wherever you are. Bye bye.
再见，拜拜。
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.